question anytime during the time, and I'll be watching those somewhat, and Jackie will help me monitor those that I might happen to miss. I'm going to back up to the cover slide for just a minute and share with you a quote that you may or may not have had time to read. But setting priorities for school improvement is often driven by politics, tradition, or who on staff is the loudest. And what we're talking about today is a tool that you can utilize which provides survey data to help guide staff in informed and objective decisions regarding both strengths and gaps in the behavior support practices in your school in your attempt to build truly sustainable, positive, and productive school environments. And these are surveys that have been developed really over the last approximately 30 years. And as part of our work with Safe and Civil Schools and working on school improvement. So what I want to do with the time that I have with you, and I'll probably plan on presenting no more than about 45 minutes, and then if there's questions we can take care of those, and if not we can just end a few minutes early. But I want to really do three things. A quick overview of what the climate and safety surveys are, but most importantly, why bother with surveys? What can this do for you in your efforts at school improvement? And then I'll wrap up the structured part of this presentation with just some logistic considerations in terms of what we recommend about frequency of giving the surveys, how often might you give the surveys, what are the costs of the surveys, and so on. So with that said, I'm going to, in just a moment, give you some information that's just a quick overview of what the surveys are. But let me, before I do that, just embellish on that, the statements on the cover slide, that the reason for this is people's perception of climate, safety, discipline, school connectedness, et cetera, all of which are constructs that our surveys try to get at, are extremely valuable information to help identify what are strengths that we want to protect in this school while we're going on to work on school improvement, but also where are the gaps or weaknesses or limitations within our school that will help us set priorities. And then if you're using the surveys across multiple years, those surveys allow you to assess your progress with those priorities. And I'll show you a number of real school examples of some reports utilizing some of these surveys. And I'm going to emphasize quite a bit that idea of identifying priorities for fairly immediate improvement, but then tracking the degree to which you're effective with those priorities as time goes on. So just some quick overview information, though. These are online surveys. It's a service that we've developed, as I say, across decades. There's a staff survey, a student survey, and a parent survey. All of the surveys are anonymous. Nobody is asked to provide a user ID nor their name. It does ask about some demographics because the reporting tools within the surveys provide an awesome level of being able to look at grade level, race, ethnicity, gender, et cetera, to try to hone more deeply on some of the questions that you may find in looking at the broad survey reports. There's elementary and secondary versions of the staff and student surveys. At elementary, we recommend like 3rd through 6th grade. 2nd grade is optional. We have a number of schools or districts that use it with 2nd grade kids, but we actually recommend that you would let your 2nd grade team make a determination whether the amount of time that it would take to walk the kids through the surveys, to help them read survey items, et cetera, to make sure that they understand survey items, whether that would be useful or not. Below 2nd grade, we definitely don't recommend it because if a 1st grader's having a good day, everything's good. If a 1st grader's having a bad day, everything's bad. So you really don't get that much school improvement data out of things. The secondary versions can be anywhere from grades 6 through 12. Requires, probably a better phrase would be a minimum of 10 minutes to complete, up to maybe 20 minutes for kids who are perhaps slow decoders or struggling with the content a bit. And these surveys provide, as I mentioned before, a real detailed and awesome level of both reporting tools but also analytics to drill deeper on your surveys. And before the end of my time with you, I want you to have a sense of the depth of reports that allow you to go deep in terms of trying to set priorities and assess improvements across time. Okay, so with that said, the surveys themselves are really quite statistically robust, and there's multiple dimensions that these surveys get at. And our surveys, unlike some other surveys that are out there that are pretty good assessments of sort of like community health, how much are drugs, gangs, et cetera, a problem in our larger community, our surveys are really getting at critical information for school improvement. And again, to protect what is working well, but also to identify priorities for improvement. So the constructs on the staff and student surveys, there's a broad category about expectations and policies, and the constructs within that are how well do we do with teaching behavioral expectations, how well do we do with supporting academic expectations, what's the perception of our staff, and you'll notice there's not a check mark on students on this one, what's the perception of our staff about the current efficacy of our policies, the degree to which they get support when it comes to behavior, and so on. Excuse me, just recovering from a cold. And I'll be showing you some examples of that one. We want to see suspensions and office referrals going down while our staff's perceptions about the efficacy of our policies is in fact improving across time. The next broad construct is climate and safety, and the constructs are perception of safety, perception of student respect, perception of student and staff interactions, and notice that all of those are both staff perception and student perception. There's another category, or subcategory rather, that students are not asked about, but staff are. What is our relationship like as a staff? How trusting are we within each other? How do we feel that we interact as a staff? And then the third broad construct is engagement. Now, this concept of engagement is called different things in different approaches: school connectedness, student engagement with school, student affiliation with school, and so on. It's basically, there's a tremendous and rapidly growing body of data that say that if students are connected to our school, if students are emotionally engaged with our school, they like being part of our school, they feel the work that they do at school is important, that is directly related to dropout rates, academic achievement, students' involvement in the judicial system. Even on the CDC website, they say kids who are invested and emotionally engaged in school wear seatbelts with greater frequency. They make fewer suicidal attempts, just all of those factors. And then a sub-factor on that one is staff's perception of family engagement. And then, of course, the parent survey, which is a much more brief survey, gets a great deal about family engagement, of do they feel like they're welcome at the school, and so on. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the broad range of what the surveys are trying to get information on for school improvement. And the survey items, for the most part, I'll talk about a separate category that's not true for this, but for the most part, the survey items are what you'll see here. It says item number 4. That's because some of the first items are just about demographics. What's your grade level? What's your race, ethnicity? What's your gender? But I feel safe at school, and the response options opinions are strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree, and no opinion. When you do reports, you can actually ask that the reports be laid out incorporating the no opinion so that you see what percent said no opinion, or you can actually, with the click of a little button when you're looking at the reports, say, I want to eliminate the no opinion from the data set, so when I look at what percent said strongly agree, it is the percent minus the people who said no opinion. So that'll just help you as I share with you examples of some of the reports. This is just what's called a reports homepage, which once the surveys are completed, one report you can get at even while the surveys are going on, which is a progress report, so that although the administrator could never see who has taken the survey, he or she could look, if the surveys are open for, let's say, a 3-week window, could look at the end of the first week and go, gosh, we have 80 staff members and only 30 people have taken the survey, so the administrator could send out a memo that says, we only have 30 surveys completed. We have 80 people on staff. We want everybody involved. Remember, the surveys are only open for another 2 weeks. Could do the same thing a week later. Could do the same thing with looking at the percentage of students, so that if, let's say, halfway through our survey window, we've only had half the students take the survey, the administrator could say, remember, we're taking this during our homeroom advisory periods, and right now we only have 400 of our 800 students who have taken the survey. All of these other reports are ones that are after the surveys have closed that we can look at a variety of standard reports. We can look specifically at student reports. We can look at comparisons between staff, student, and parent surveys, and I'll show you some examples of all of these, as well as we can look at year-to-year results. So this is year-to-year results. Bear with me here. And this report I just pulled from a district that's given us permission to utilize their surveys as an analytic tool, and I pulled this report at the end of 2014. This district has actually now given the surveys through 2016 as well, and so you could report on any or all of those years to look at progress. So I'll share with you examples of the reports in just a little while. But let me find out just a little bit about some of you who are with me on this webinar. I'd like to get a little bit of information about your job role so that I can know whether to talk very much about district level reporting and what it can do at the district level, or whether you're predominantly building based or both. So Jackie, if you would pull up the poll for us, and if you can, as participants, click on, you'll see the poll question is down at the lower right-hand side of my screen. Jackie, might it be elsewhere on other people's screens?
It's probably on the right-hand side of the screen somewhere. I see that some folks a couple folks have found it. You might have to click on if there's a little icon blinking in the upper right or the bottom right.
So you'll see the visual screen that I've got there just shows
Randy,
what the items are.
I think I put the wrong question up.
Oh, yeah, Jackie, we do. That's okay. Let's go with what they've got there. No problem. We had a slight glitch on our end, folks, and no big deal. Disregard the main screen that's there. This was a poll that I was going to give you later, but it's useful just fine now as well. Give me some information about current status of behavior support within your school. And if you're district level, just think about maybe most of the schools that you serve. But check off A if you have a behavior support team, whether you call that PBIS or our approach within Safe and Civil is called Foundations, but it's very analogous to PBIS school-wide. Do you have a team that meets regularly and guides staff effort on climate, safety, and discipline, meaning it's a viable, visible, ongoing force within school improvement in your school? Check off B if you have a team but they're only intermittently active. We find this in many schools. Mark off C if we have a team on paper, but they don't really, they're not all that active, they don't do much at all. Or D, we don't have a specific organizational or political force within the school focused on climate safety and discipline or the behavior aspects of multi-tier system of support. So go ahead and check one of those off quickly, and Jackie, when you've seen a fair number of those, whenever you feel it's appropriate, go ahead and show us the results. While we're waiting. Oh, great. Go ahead and let's see what we ended up with. Great. Very nice, Jackie. Okay, so good. 36% have a full and viable team. More power to you. Protect that. Carry on. And for those of you, if you don't currently have ways of assessing safety, climate, perception of safety, climate, and discipline, I think this could really benefit your efforts. Those of you who marked either B or C, you have a team, but it's not as functional as we would like. Survey data might be a viable way to jumpstart that team's efficacy by giving it very powerful data about what are our staff and student perceptions of both strengths, but areas or gaps. So thank you for that, Jackie. Let me talk for a little bit. Do you want to quickly jump
back into the other one?
Sure, Jackie, if you can do that.
Sure, I'm opening that up right now.
Oh, great. Thank you for your flexibility, Jackie. So, yeah, we've got another survey up here, and these are the only two surveys that I'm going to do during this time, but it will help inform my comments. And this one is the one that I had mentioned before about I'd like to know a little bit about your job role, particularly whether you are district-based, meaning, A, that you serve multiple schools in some capacity. That may be as an administrator, supervisor, special education coordinator, perhaps a pupil personnel services person, or a district-level coach in behavior support. B, if you're a building-based administrator, dean, supervisor, assistant principal, principal. C, if you're a building-based teacher, counselor, social worker, and I may have left out some roles like service center or State Department person. Just check other if you're not school or district-based.
Okay, it looks like we have most everybody. Let me share those.
Let's see, Jackie, I'm not seeing the results yet.
Click the button. Well, let me run through. It looks like the role is at the district level. We had 4 of our participants online right now, which is about 36%. And then other was about 27%.
Okay.
The folks with us today.
Great. Great. Okay, good. So I will make sure that I do some talking about how the strengths of this at the district level, not just at the building level. So this little section, which is the bulk of what I want to talk with you about, which is why bother with this? I know I know schools can be deluged with surveys. And we never want to waste people's time, so the why is real important here. It can add, I want to start with a few slides on that this can add tremendous value to other data sources that you may be collecting already about school improvement relative to behavior, safety, climate, and discipline, that it really is important that we assess the perception of our key stakeholders. And then I want to show you a lot of examples of how survey data helped both set priorities for improvement, but then track the progress from year to year about some of those improvements. So let's start with the first of those, which is using survey data to add value to other data sources, but also to go deeper. I know that my PBIS colleagues, PBIS via the Technical Assistance Center, they put tremendous emphasis on analyzing office discipline referrals. And while I agree that that's an extremely valuable data source and should be analyzed, we do find, especially over time, as your school improvement efforts reduce the frequency of the number of kids who are being sent to the office for behavior, that actually becomes a less and less useful data source about our overarching school climate and our school policies, our quality of supervision, et cetera. And it really becomes more about the anomalies of our children whose lives are under the most severe crisis. Likewise, suspensions and expulsions, extremely valuable data. We want to see both of those first bullet points going down, but we have worked with a number of schools where they brought Safe and Civil in because they had actually reduced out-of-school suspensions, but staff was up in arms because staff was feeling like, but now we've just got nothing that's helped improve the behavior of those kids, and we just have kids in school that are creating even more chaos. So other data sources that we always emphasize within our staff development work with districts that we have the privilege of working with are at least once a semester formal observations of the common areas of the school. Next one is the one that we're talking about here, at least annual surveys of staff, students, and families. And then focus groups, the last one there is just anytime you have data that is puzzling to you, do some focus groups to try to figure out what that data might mean to help explain any of those previous bullet points. But obviously I'm focusing with you here on this one on surveys, and let's look at what that can do to go deeper. Staff members, students, and parents can provide extremely valuable information about school settings, situations, policies, and procedures through surveys. In fact, when I first started doing school-wide discipline, which was clear back in the early to mid-'80s, 1983 was the first school that I did. The 1984-85 school year was when I first started offering this training to cohorts of leadership teams. And we actually just started with a very, very simple staff survey, because what we found is if we're going to ask staff to work with us to improve the climate and safety and discipline of the school, starting with addressing staff concerns about safety, climate, and discipline within the school is a way to create buy-in and a way to show progress. We found that to be so valuable in our very, very early years, along with office discipline referrals, suspensions, expulsions. That was when we started adding in the student surveys and the parent surveys as well. But the staff surveys in particular, we always want staff to perceive that the work that's being done within the school via a PBIS or foundations kind of team is always being done in a way to honor their concerns and to make their efficacy as teachers even easier and better so that there are fewer barriers to learning. And just a reminder here, annual surveys provide a year's worth of data to assist in setting priorities. One of the things that we realized was a little bit of a weakness with some of the districts that we had the privilege of working with is they would give the surveys, they would use the surveys along with discipline referrals and observation information to set some immediate priorities to work on, and then once they finished those priorities, they didn't look at the survey data again, or they would go, oh gosh, do we now need to survey again another time during the year? You don't necessarily have to. If you found out that you really needed to work on student-to-student respect, and you needed to work on the safety of morning arrival, and those were your two most urgent priorities because you had multiple data sources that pointed to those. Once you've worked on those, and if you've ameliorated them to a degree that you're going, oh, what do we get to work on next? You don't have to go to the surveys again. You can go to the survey data that you've already got and go, okay, after morning safety concerns about morning arrival and interactional concerns about student-to-student respect, what were the next areas or what were the next categories of connectedness or safety or climate and discipline that we ought to work on next? And we already have that data at our fingertips with these reports. So some advantages of surveys. They're a relatively easy way to get information from a lot of people with nobody having to take too much time. They're confidential, so it does allow a staff member to say, no, I don't think I get good support when it comes to behavior and discipline, or I don't think our policies are particularly effective. An advantage, of course, of online is that they're available 24/7. The reports allow us to view the responses by grade, race, ethnicity, gender, and to drill down, but only as far as we would have at least 10 responses. In other words, if you only have 7 Native American students in your 7th grade, you could not see what those 7 students said, because as you're trying to drill down about grade level, gender, race, ethnicity, there's these powerful filtering tools, but it never allows you to filter below 10, because we want everybody to know nobody is ever going to see what you said, nor to be able to narrow down, oh gosh, we know we only have 2 African Americans in the 5th grade, and therefore we know what those 2 students said. It even allows you to monitor the progress of the number of surveys completed, as I shared with you earlier. So you use survey data to assess the perceptions of your key stakeholders. In my opinion, when it comes to school improvement, the most important one is staff, because we have to have staff on board with all parts of this, but tremendous value to find out what our students think, and where are discrepancies between what students and staff might think can be a real wake-up call to staff. And parent surveys, what we really say about these is they're valuable as both a public relations tool. We want to know what you think, but they're also valuable of, do we have discrepancies? For example, you may find that parents don't think that the school is particularly safe, but if you have data that says staff think that, and students really agree at a very, very high level that they feel safe within the school, then that data can be shared with the parents of, look at what a high percentage of students feel that the school is safe. Okay, so here are just some examples of a few of the types of questions that can be answered with this, and then I'll start showing you some examples. Look at those first 2 bullets there. Do you know what percentage of staff would agree that teachers treat students respectfully? Do you know what percentage of students would agree that teachers treat students respectfully? Do you think there'd be congruence there? Do you think there'd be some discrepancies? I'll show you some data from a real school in just a minute. It was very interesting in that regard. What percent of staff would agree that the work that, what percentage of staff would agree that students think the work that they do in school is important? And what percent of students themselves would agree that the work that they would do is important? And do you see a discrepancy there? And again, I'm going to show you a very powerful example of a discrepancy there. What percent of your staff would agree that the school has a consistent approach to management and discipline? And is that trending positive? If you look at this across multiple years, is that trending positively, or is it trending in the wrong direction? I'm going to show you an example there of some real useful data from a school that in many ways looks like it's improving, but we went backwards a little bit on that particular item, which is a concern that needs to be looked into. Okay, so with climate and safety surveys, you can learn about the kind of constructs that I showed you earlier, but perception of safety, social emotional strengths and weaknesses, respectful interactions, kid to kid, kid to adult, adult to kid, consistency and enforcement of school rules, feelings or perceptions about school and the work that we do in school, personal connectedness to school, which again is such an incredibly powerful data source, and disciplinary problems. What are the perceptions from mild to severe of things like classroom disruption, all the way to problems of perceptions about, are there weapons in our school? Okay, so with that said, let me show you just a couple of examples to get us going, and then I really want to hone in on that idea of using this data to prioritize. This is real data from an elementary in a fairly high socioeconomic status community that's served. And one of the items is, does this school have a problem with students bullying other students? And this real data from this real school, 11.8% of staff said it was either a moderate or a severe problem, but 43.3% of students said that it's either a moderate or a severe problem. And we actually see this discrepancy, not always by any means, but we see it fairly often in high SES communities, and particularly elementary level, because if the kids are bullying are really bright and sophisticated, they bully really well in ways that frequently the adults do not know. Would you know in your school what the staff and student perceptions of an item of that type would be? Okay, let's look at another example. This is real data from a staff that we have a district that gave us permission to actually utilize the data from all approximately 100 of their schools that have been doing these surveys for multiple years, and we changed the names of their schools. So if you want a demo of this, you can actually look at this real data from this real district. All of the school names are artificial names, and we just chose tree, the category of trees, and this school, which is fictitiously named Birch, the item reads, "Students treat other students respectfully in their classrooms." So sorry, I just in the fall of 2014 and in the fall of 2011, this is the staff survey. All the staff was asked to respond. Students treat each other respectfully in their classrooms. And again, they could strongly agree, they could disagree, they could strongly disagree, or no opinion. Mainly, I want you to look at this bottom line down here, and my arrow's pointing the wrong direction, but you won't see it if I put it all the way to the left. In 2011, 87% of staff either agreed or strongly agreed. 3 years later, 95%. So it was pretty strong to begin with, even stronger 4 years later. I'm going to show you two other slides from this school. This one, students. In the fall of 2011, this is students treat each other respectfully in the hallways. 65% of students agreed or strongly agreed. So the figures at the bottom of this slide collapse the agree and strongly agree. And in 2011, 65% of kids agreed with that statement. And 4 years later, 84% agreed. So great progress. But even in a school that's trending positively, this is still Birch Elementary, real data. This is back to the staff survey. The item at the top up there, get my arrow out of the way, the school has a consistent approach to behavior management and discipline that is asked of staff. It is not asked of students. And down at the bottom, that was actually stronger in 2011. 96% of staff agreed and 85% agreed. And I share this data with you mainly to say, even in a school that is trending the right way on a lot of things, there can be slippage of some other things, not through anybody's intent, but perhaps because of focusing on new and different priorities. So this would bear watching in this school. This would be powerful data for a PBIS team that is taking great pride in what they do. But gosh, in 2011, we only had 85% of our staff agree that our overarching policies are being effective. If you have a really well-organized PBIS team, each member of that team should formally represent staff members. you should go to the people that you represent and say, hey, you don't even have to tell me what you think, but why would more staff be disagreeing that we have an effective policy, so that we can nip that before it gets to a point 2, 3, or 5 years from now where only 50% of staff might agree. We can get on that before it becomes a problem. Okay, so I want to share with you some other data examples to get at these two issues. Utilizing survey data to set priorities for immediate improvement, what are our biggest priorities, but then using that survey data to track progress from year to year. And I just shared one of my favorite quotes. It's actually from former Secretary of State John Foster Dulles. I did read a biography of him, by the way, and he's actually a little bit creepy, but nonetheless, it's still a great quote. The measure of success is not whether you have a tough problem to deal with, but whether it's the same problem you had last year. Survey data can actually allow you to go, 4 years ago, the surveys and office discipline referral led us to really target category X. We targeted category X. We had data that said the next year it wasn't as much of a problem, and therefore we went on to work on problem Y. We now have data that says problem Y has been ameliorated. So last year we went on to work on problem Z, and now we're going on to work on problem K, let's say. So some examples to get at that. I'm going to skip over that because we've already done it. Allows us to answer and look at data. Are there safety concerns? What are the concerns that are most urgent for our staff? What are our biggest strengths and weaknesses as perceived by parents? What category of concern is the most significant to students? Is it interactions? Is it safety? Is it being taught expectations? What about location? Are there particular locations that are of concern? And if so, is it particular subgroups who are concerned about that? Like, do sixth graders feel less safe in the cafeteria and commons areas than might other grade levels? And what are the biggest discrepancies between staff and students? So some examples. This is a report that I pulled together. This is data from a real high school. It is a large comprehensive high school. It is in a very low socioeconomic status community, all of those problems that are associated with very low socioeconomic status. This was before they started working with Safe and Civil Schools, and this item is item number 14. And students treat each other with respect in the halls. 50% of staff either strongly agreed or agreed, and 48% of students agreed. So the discrepancy is 1.6%. Now, I'm going to show you a number of items. So just remember, this category is the percent of staff who agreed. This category is the percent of students, and this is the discrepancy between them. And because I'm kind of behind where I was going to have you take a look at this and even put in the notes some things that you notice. I'm gonna be more speedy. First of all, this report I actually sorted by the percent of students agree. So it may look like students didn't even think about it because all of their responses are very low. That is not true. There is actually one item, if you looked at this whole report, there is one item that students agreed with it at about an 87% level that would be at the very bottom of this. So this is sorted by the students' biggest concern or showing the lowest percent agree. And a couple of fascinating things. If I had more time, I could spend probably 10 minutes just on this little visual alone. But anything that asks about student behavior, staff perception and student perception has a very low discrepancy to it. Moderately low on that one, very low on that one, bizarrely low on that one. Students treat staff members respectfully. Students and staff both express concerns. But anything that asks about staff behavior, probably the most significant, there's a big difference in perception. For most classes, teachers do a good job of making sure students know how they can get help if students fall behind. 100% of staff agreed. Now, I've actually been to this school. I've worked with this staff, not in the before, this data that you see here. This is a caring staff. This is a veteran staff. This is a large district. They could go to, the senior staff could go to any other high school that they wanted to go to. They're in this school because they care about the needs of urban youth. I do not think this is lying. They think that they make themselves available. This one became a fairly quick priority, and the leadership team said, hey, we're going to be working on other things more across time, but we're going to send you a memo once a month that reminds you, let kids know when, where, and how you're available for help, because when they shared with staff, staff was shocked that 40% of kids felt that they weren't available to help. All they did was sent memos to staff that said, market your efforts, let kids know when you're available for help, and the next year that item went up to about 95% of students agreeing. Other things are harder. This one's heartbreaking to me. Students are proud to be a part of this school. 54% of students agreed. That's heartbreaking. Only 8.3% of staff agreed. I will tell you across time, both of those went up to about 80% within this school, because school pride was targeted as a major part of school improvement. Can you see that office discipline referrals would give you zero information about an item like, do students perceive that they're proud to be part of this school? Okay, looking at some other examples. You can custom filter this stuff. So this is one particular survey item. Students are, and I can read it, I'm sure you can. The item is just right here on this line. Students are taught the rules and expectations for behavior in the cafeteria. I mainly just wanted to show you, we've checked off male, 9th grade and 10th grade. We've checked off the major racial categories just to make the report easier. We mainly have Black, Hispanic, and white students in this school. And while you could check off Native American, it just adds a column here. But this allows you to see every single item within the school. We, for example, one of the items is staff treat students fairly. If you find a large percentage of students disagreed with that, you can go directly to this item and go, let's look at this item by, do we have discrepancies by race, ethnicity? We had one high school where 40% of the kids disagreed that staff treated students fairly, and it was a delightful racial mix of about somewhere around 35% Hispanic, somewhere around 35% white, about 20% African American, and then a fair number of other, and then a small number of Native American and or Asian. But in looking at the discrepancy by race ethnicity, there were no discrepancies by race ethnicity about who felt staff treated students fairly. So that was a way to say to staff, this is an area of concern that we want to work on, but we should take great pride that African American kids, white kids, and Hispanic kids, the major categories that we have the privilege of serving, perceive this at about the same level of concern. So it's not a complexity of a racial issue. There were some significant discrepancies by grade level, though, in that particular school. Okay. I'm going to skip over some items here and just show you a few. This is Knight High School, and again, it's tree names, and Nightshade is the name, but excuse me. I'm going to skip down here. This data shows the data from the fall of 11 through the fall of 14. And so look at the bottom. In the fall of 2011, only 55% of staff agreed or strongly agreed that students treat each other respectfully in the hallways, is the item number. And by 4 years later, 87% of staff agreed. Now, an example, another example of a type of items is, are these things a problem in our school? And students aren't asked strongly agree, disagree. They're asked, is it a severe problem, a moderate problem, a mild problem, or no problem? This is the staff and students in 2011. So is theft or damage of property by students a problem at this school? And 47% of staff said it's either moderate or severe, collapsed together. 42% of students agreed. And 4 years later, looking at that particular item, it's better. 31% of staff are concerned, 27% of students agree. So we're gaining on it, but it's still a problem in this school. This is another way of showing, and again, this is the staff report. The item reads, are student clicks a problem at this school? And again, going to the bottom just to make this easy. In 2011, 45% of staff felt that it was a significant problem. By 4 years later, only 18% of staff agreed it was a problem. I'm going to, again, in the interest of time, skip over this one. Are serious threats of violence towards staff members a problem at this school? And in 2011, 10% of staff felt it was a serious problem. In fact, that's that purple data source. 10% of our staff in a high school are saying that threats of violence against staff are a problem. 4 years later, it's 3%, which is much, much better, still an area of concern because it's such a severe problem. But again, we're gaining on it. So let's look at a different school. This looks like Tupelo, Mississippi. It is not, with all due respect to Tupelo. Tupelo is the name of a tree, and in our district where we have the tree names, this is fictitiously named real school, fictitiously named Tupelo Middle School. Students treat staff members respectfully is the item. And in the fall of 2011, only 39% of staff agreed. By 4 years later, 75% of staff agreed. This is students. Students treat staff members respectfully, and we didn't see as much change among students. Big change among staff. 50% of students in 2011 agreed, 60% agreed that many years later. We actually find that because your kid population is turning over, probably, hopefully, much more than your staff population is turning over, changing the student perception is even a little bit harder just in that students don't have anything to compare it to, because the kids in this middle school in 2014 weren't even here in the year 2011. But again, we're trending in a good direction with both staff and students. This item is one I shared with you earlier, but not the results from this school. I'm always so excited to see this kind of result. The school's current approach to behavior and discipline is effective, and 39% in 2011 agreed with that statement. Exactly double, 78% of respondents agreed that many years later. So still needs to be worked on, but it's important, and I just added a note to myself here at the bottom to be able to tell you that in this school, over those years, office discipline referrals went down by 40%, while we now have double the percentage of staff who feel that our policies are effective. And again, if you're in some schools or districts where you've gotten either suspensions or office discipline referrals to go down just by going, we're counting, don't send so many kids to the office, or districts saying, we're counting, don't suspend as many kids, but you're not empowering people with strategies to prevent the behaviors that lead to office referrals and or suspensions, you will find that while office referrals or suspensions may go down, if you are assessing people's perception of the efficacy of our policies, if they don't feel that they're empowered with better strategies to prevent the behaviors and better in-class strategies to respond to the misbehaviors that do occur, you will have really grave political problems for trying to work on school improvement if you're not seeing the direction that fictitiously named Tupelo Middle School has found. Here's just another example. Does this student have a problem with students bullying other students? And this is one where it went from 49 to 39. So again, trending in the right direction. But boy, we shouldn't be overly congratulatory about ourselves about this one, because 4 out of 10 kids still feel that bullying is a severe or a moderate problem in our schools. So school improvement is great. We should always make people feel wonderful about the progress that we make, but we also should always be looking at what do we get to work on next, and what will do the most to both improve behavior at the school, but also improve kids' connection to the school and our staff's perception about the efficacy of our policies. Okay, so I'm going to, again, skip over just a couple of other things because I want to get to some of the logistics. Relative to some logistics, reporting survey results to staff and others. One of the major criticisms that people have about taking surveys, we take all these surveys and then we never excuse me, then we never hear anything about the results. Anybody who takes the time to do surveys, if we ask students to do surveys, the student body should get some data back. What did we learn from you about this? If we're going to bother to have the staff survey, and if we're going to bother the staff to go help us get these surveys from the kids, either in advisories or in English classes or something else, we have to get information to the staff back about what did we learn? What did we learn about strengths? What did we learn about areas of concern? Also, make sure you're getting information back to students and parents. We may or may not be reporting things about staff perception to kids and to parents, but we should get data back about what did we learn from the student and parent surveys. And then make sure you archive the data, although it's archived within the system itself for a significant number of years, I think 5 after you quit taking the surveys, so that you can do the year-to-year comparison, but archive what your goals and priorities are so that you could do, for example, what I shared with you about Knight High School. They were able to say to their staff, look, this year we got up to 95% of kids agreeing that teachers let us know when they, the teacher, are available for help. And last year, remember, that was only 58% of students who agreed. We as a staff should take great pride in those data. So when should we administer the surveys? We feel that it's very powerful data at least once a year. Remember the first data set that I showed where staff perception about the efficacy of our discipline policies went down last year. You go 3 years without surveying, an item like that can cascade, and you may not get to it until it really is a crisis. So if we're surveying once a year, we find doing it either mid-fall, midwinter, or late in the school year, whatever time of year you choose, survey again at the same time. And we find any of those 3 times to be very, very effective. Just because of the way I've been doing school improvement projects recently and launching them in the late spring so that we can work with the leadership team with some training in the summer and or work with the total staff when they report back in August, that doing some baseline data late in the school year to inform what do we work on to improve for the first day of school next year is actually a very powerful metric for school improvement. Obviously, you want to avoid too early in the year when we're in the honeymoon period and when we're just, your 6th graders don't know, your 6th graders and 9th graders in secondary schools don't know what the school is like until they've settled in there a little bit. And of course, avoid testing periods because of everybody's stress level. And just the focus needs to be on that. Let me share with you a little bit of information on costs. And let's see. Oh, I'm just going to take a look at the questions here to make sure that I get to these. How much of a discrepancy should be concerning? Anything under 5%, yeah, Amy, you're absolutely right. I wouldn't be concerned about it at all. And in fact, I'm not overly concerned until I start seeing a 15, 20, 30-point discrepancy between staff and students. And question that Jackie answered, you purchased for all the students at a single site. We actually price this as $1 per student enrolled within no charge for staff and parent survey. And that's regardless of how many students you survey. And we have a lot of schools that go, but should we sample? Please excuse me. Should we sample? We actually find it's logistically easier in most schools to just survey all the students. Do it in advisories or homeroom, or if you're elementaries, take it one of the times that the kids report to the computer lab and do the survey as the major focus of that 20 to 30 minutes that they spend in the lab that day. We actually find it more disruptive to go, well, let's survey 10% of kids, which means we have to pull those kids out of class, so it's announcements over the all-call. Are people going and actually going into class? I need Susan, I need Jim, I need Jamal, I need Maria. That's more disruptive than go, let's just survey all of our kids. You can get the surveys via Pacific Northwest Publishing, and we'll actually make sure that we send you a link. We're happy to do demos of the surveys for you or other district leaders if you're interested. One purchase for only part of a student population, only 2 out of 8 buildings. We actually find that it's best to do this as each individual building, and that's the way the surveys are designed, is as a total building. And you would purchase for all of the students at that site, whether all of the students took it or not. Okay, so just a couple of other quick things. And please, if you think of any other questions, go ahead and add them to the list, and I'll watch it as I head towards wrapping up. I want to share with you, without naming the district, a district that we've been working with, both assisting with their school improvement efforts. The whole district has moved towards, has implemented foundations. They all have active foundations teams. We have done CHAMPS, our classroom management approach training, with all of the teachers within the district, and this just shows they've been utilizing the surveys, and I don't have their 15 and 16 data, but they have 29 secondary schools, and their data actually involves, I'll just go directly to 2014, 1,800 secondary staff members and about 17,000 students that take the survey every year. And what that has allowed is these are district data, which the school board has found very, very powerful. So this is, the blue is secondary students, the red is secondary staff, and this item clicks. Is it a moderate or serious problem? You'll see staff went down from 40% to 27%. That's about 1,800 staff members each year. Student perception, not quite as dramatic, but still trending in the right direction, which allowed the board to say, similar data on bullying, by the way, and pushing, teasing, and so on. That has allowed the board to publicize to the local paper, we're working on this. It's still a concern and a problem, but it's getting better because the district is making a concerted effort to make it better. Look at this, going from 36% of kids feeling that bullying is a problem to 28. That's almost 18,000, an aggregate of almost 18,000 kids. Look at teacher or adult perception from 45% to 30%. It's been very powerful ways to keep the district focused that as we're working on multi-tier systems of support, our behavioral priorities and our behavioral approach, which in this case happens to be safe and civil, it hasn't made things perfect, but it's trending in the right direction. Teasing, moderate to serious problem, 47% to 33%. So heading towards wrapping up here, student misbehavior in classrooms, kid perceptions, gone down a little bit each year, but it's still a concern, which allows the district to be going, and therefore we're going to be going deeper in classroom management and Tier 2 supports as needed. But staff members were trending in the right direction. So a lot of staff is still concerned, but even just this one, it's better, but it allowed the school administration and the teacher union to coordinate together that, hey, we still need to keep working on classroom management and expanding everybody's skill sets to reduce the problem of student misbehavior in classrooms. Students treat staff members respectfully, and now we're shifting to strongly agree, so going up is getting better. 2012, about 1,800 staff members agreed. We're 11% higher that many years later. Think about in your schools, have the secondary schools made progress so that more staff feel that kids treat them respectfully? Do more staff feel that classroom disruptions are a problem but still less of a problem than they used to be? And this is the last slide, and then I'll skip to my conclusion, so I end at 2 o'clock. This is an aggregate of certain items just shown with a different reporting methodology. The school has a consistent approach to behavior management and discipline. 2011, 67% of our staff agreed. 4 years later, 76%. The school's approach to behavior and discipline is effective, 64 up to 74. And remember, this is 1,800 staff members. The school's current approach to discipline contributes in a positive way to job satisfaction. Again, all trending in the right direction. And I was actually able to report to the school board that all of the concerns are all trending in the right direction, and the only one that was trending towards perception of more of a problem within this district, interestingly, was a greater number of staff concerned about chronic absenteeism, which we consider to be a very healthy sign because it was something that we were just beginning to emphasize within trainings and support within this district. So it was this has provided a wonderful way to keep the school board focused, because here's something that you hear about staff development is this too shall pass. If you are making a commitment to behavior support and you don't have a vehicle for showing that we are trending in the right direction, not just with reductions of suspensions and expulsions, but with perception about the efficacy of our policies, kid perception of the efficacy of safety, and so on, then you're kind of missing the boat. So surveys can, in our opinion, obviously biased because we developed them, but surveys add great value to your behavior support efforts and your school climate efforts as defined in the new ESSA regulations. It can identify hidden concerns that we otherwise might not notice. It can identify those discrepancies between staff and students, and particularly as it gets egregious, 20% or more. It can set priorities to unify the staff. This is why we're recommending that we work on this particular category or this particular area. And it can assess the progress of those priorities and assess that progress year to year. So thank you so much for taking the time. And if, as I said, if you would like a demo of the surveys, if you'd like to be able to look at the reporting tools, we can assist you with all of this, and we'll just make sure that you have our contact information if it's of interest. So thank you very much for your time and attention. And Jackie, any wrap-up comments on your end?
I think we've got all the questions. Thank you, Randy. We appreciate you taking the time to go through this. We appreciate everybody who joined us today taking the time to see what the surveys are about. Just a reminder, we will send a link out later in the week that will have the access to the webinar recording so that you can share it with other folks or review information. If this was useful to you, we have several other webinars coming up over the next couple of months, one covering designing behavior plans for tackling bullying with Jessica Sprick. We've got some new Tough Kid Tier 2 interventions and superhero social skills coming up with Bill Jensen, and then some instructional support, a webinar via explicit instruction with Anita Archer. And you can find out more information about all of those webinars at the Pacific Northwest Publishing website at pacificnwpublish.com. If you have any questions about the webinar today or the surveys, you can certainly email this online systems at pacificnwpublish.com to get more information, or you can reach out to me by replying to the emails that we sent you with the links and such for the videos. Thanks all.